Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a super powerful tool for visualizing just about any process you can think of, the UML activity diagram. Let's dive right in.
You know that feeling, right? You're trying to explain a workflow, and you find yourself tangled in a web of, if this happens, then you do that. And, oh, but while that's going on, you also have to. It's a mess. Trying to use words alone can turn even a simple process into a confusing maze. But thankfully, there is a much, much better way.
And this is it, the activity diagram. Think of it as a clean, simple, visual map for any process. It just cuts right through all that verbal confusion by showing you exactly what happens, the order it happens in, and, crucially, who's responsible for each step. It's the elegant solution we've been waiting for.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the building blocks. Then we'll look at how to control the flow of the process. After that, we'll get into the cool stuff, like handling tasks that happen at the same time and assigning responsibilities. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at a complete real-world example.
All right, let's start at square one. We've got to understand the most fundamental piece of any activity diagram.
So any big, complex process is really just a bunch of smaller tasks strung together. In the world of activity diagrams, each of those individual tasks is called an action node. Honestly, the best way to think of it is like a single Lego brick. It's the most basic unit we're going to use to build our entire masterpiece.
And here's what it looks like in the wild. It's just a simple box with rounded corners, and inside you write a clear description of one single task. You know, something like send email or submit form or calculate total. See? Simple.
Okay, so we've got our Lego bricks, our actions. But a pile of bricks isn't a castle, right? We need to know how to connect them to actually create a logical flow.
Every single process, no matter how simple or complex, needs a clear beginning and a clear end. And in UML, we have these universal symbols for that. The solid black dot, that's our starting line, the initial state. And that bullseye symbol, that's the finish line, the final state. Every diagram you make is going to have these too.
Now, check this out. This is the most basic flow you can possibly have. We kick things off at the initial node, the dot. We follow the arrow to our action, check tank levels, and then we follow the next arrow to the final node. As soon as we hit that bullseye, boom, the process is done.
Okay, that was pretty easy. But let's be real. Life is rarely a straight line, is it? Processes almost always have branches and different paths you can take. So what happens when we need to make a choice?
For that, we use this little guy, the decision node. It's always shown as a diamond. Think of it exactly like a fork in the road. In this example, after we check tank levels, the process flows into that diamond. And from there, it has to choose one of the outgoing paths based on some condition. This is where the brains of the operation are.
So how does the diagram make that choice? It uses what are called guard conditions. You see them there, written in the square brackets. After an action is done, the system checks these conditions and follows the path where the condition is true. Now here's a huge pro tip for you. Always, always include an else condition. It's your safety net. It catches any case you didn't think of and prevents your whole process from just getting stuck.
Okay, so we've got steps that happen one after another, and we have branching choices. But, you know, modern systems and businesses are all about multitasking. So how do we show actions that are all happening at the very same time?
Now this is a super common point of confusion, so let's make this crystal clear. A decision node, that's the diamond, is about making a choice. It's either one path or the other. A fork node, that thick black bar, is totally different. It's about concurrency. It's one path that splits into multiple paths that all happen at the same time. It's not a choice. It's like a team splitting up to get a bunch of different jobs done all at once.
And making coffee is the perfect way to get this. Think about it. You can boil the water and grind the coffee beans at the same time, right? So that first black bar, the fork node, splits the process into those two parallel tasks. Then that second black bar, the join node, acts like a meeting point. It just waits, and it doesn't let the process continue to brew coffee until both the water is boiled and the beans are ground.
So we're doing great. We know what happens in our process, we know when it happens, but there's still a giant piece of the puzzle missing from our map. Who is actually doing all this work?
Right? I mean, a process map that doesn't have clear owners is just a recipe for confusion and finger pointing. So how do we build that accountability right into the diagram itself?
We use something called swim lanes, and it's a great name because, just like in a swimming pool, they divide the whole diagram into these parallel lanes.
Each lane belongs to a different person or department, or maybe even an automated system. Looking at this one, you can see instantly that the flight attendant handles the trash, the ground crew takes care of fuel, and catering loads the food. It's a brilliant visual way to assign responsibility.
Okay, we've covered all the core pieces. Now it's time for the grand finale. Let's put all this new knowledge to the test and break down a complete, real-world diagram from the very start to the very end.
Let's walk through this stock trade. Okay, so it starts, we verify, and then execute the order. Now we hit a decision node, our diamond. If the trade fails, we just send a failure notice and we're done. But if it succeeds, look what happens. A fork kicks off 3 separate actions that all happen at once. We send a confirmation, we debit the account, and we update the portfolio. Then, that join node patiently waits for all 3 of those things to finish before the process can finally move on to close order and reach the end. See? All the pieces we talked about, working together beautifully.
So, as you go off and start making your own amazing diagrams, just try to keep these key ideas in mind. Be consistent with how much detail you put in each action. Please be careful with your conditions and use that else guard to avoid errors. And just remember, these diagrams are here to help clarify and add detail to workflows, not to replace every other model you have.
And there you have it. You now have the tools to visually map out and untangle pretty much any complex workflow you can throw at it. So I have to ask, what process are you going to map out first? Your team's project pipeline? Your personal morning routine? The plan for that next big idea? The power to visualize it is now in your hands.